Welcome to Design Talks Now, hosted by Design Pavilion in support of New York City's international design community. I'm Eileen Shaw, producer of Design Pavilion and Design Talks. Our mission is to increase public awareness and the perceived value of design thinking, services, and projects. Design Talks Now is our virtual response to the COVID-19 shutdown. And as the world slowly moves through the phases of reopening, we're documenting your observations, your big thoughts and ideas during this extraordinary time. Today's talk, titled Building Tomorrow's Home, the Future of Residential Design, explores where the home is heading, geographically, aesthetically, spatially, culturally, and even ethically, as society grapples with not only recent headlines, but the reality of climate change as well. What's behind the rise of the passive house? How can residential design support varying family types? How can we provide an alternative and/or addition to urban life, all the more desirable now during the coronavirus era? Melissa Feldman, writer and principal of Stroll Productions, will moderate this discussion between Bill Callio, co-founder and head of operations at the Brooklyn Home Company, and Nina Cook-John, principal of Studio Cook-John, and Drew Lang, principal of Lang Architecture and the founder of Brick and Wonder. And so now, let's begin.
Hi, I'm Nina Cook-John, founder and principal of Studio Cook-John Architecture and Design. I'm an architect practicing in the New York City metro area, specializing in residential design. Residential architecture has unique challenges, especially when designing customized spaces. It demands an intimate engagement with the everyday lives of the families and individuals that will breathe life into their new homes. The new homes are not only beautiful, but also respond to the differing needs of each family. In apartment spaces, that often means taking advantage of every square inch of available space. That might be with the help of custom millwork or by creating flexible spaces so that any one room can perform multiple functions. It also means paying close attention to the visible construction details, the materials used, and the overall lighting in a space, all important elements affecting one's overall feeling of well-being.
I've been working as an architect and a developer for over 20 years. What drew me to architecture is that it's holistic, where economic considerations alongside environmental considerations, alongside community-driven and socially driven perspectives are all melted together. It's not that the details don't matter, it all matters. It is almost a dialogue that we're having with nature and the place where we are. The historic elements of a place, who is it that's lived there, and what is the personal history of the people with whom we're working. I can help people tell their stories in relation to the buildings that they inhabit. There are always new people that we're working with, and everybody brings their history and their perspective and their personal culture to bear. And we want to make sure that the architectural interventions that we make very clearly relate to that. The measure of success for me when I create projects with people is, do they feel a true sense of connection to the place where they live that we've created with them?
Hi, I'm Bill Kaleo with the Brooklyn Home Company. We develop residential real estate in Brooklyn, New York. We do condominiums and townhomes. The Brooklyn Home Company's mission has always been to create an oasis in the city. And there's two components to that. There's beautiful design and well laid out homes. That's very important to us, and we've always stood by that. And the second part is healthy homes. How do we make that oasis as comfortable as we possibly can? And for us, through our research, it's by using passive house principles.
Passive house is basically the best way that we know how to build buildings today. We add a lot of insulation to the building envelope, typically twice as much as you would have in a normal building.
We're talking about triple pane windows and vapor barriers to make sure that you're not allowing leaks throughout the home. That allows you to lower your heating and cooling costs by about 50%. And it also allows you to have super clean air inside of your home. There's a system that brings in filtered fresh air from the outside. In your bathrooms and in certain strategic areas of your home, it's extracting the stale air. It's pulling all that air. When your kid has a cold and sneezes, that air is getting extracted. So you're breathing the best quality air you could possibly breathe in an indoor air environment.
One of my experiences of selling in passive house construction is people come in and remark quite quickly on how quiet a home feels and how solid it feels. You're living in an environment with fresh air and consistent temperatures, so you feel it immediately, and I think that improves on people's quality of life every day. There really are so many benefits, and some of them are financial, but some of them are very tangible in terms of quality of life, health, and playing a part in helping with climate change.
The number one source of carbon emissions are buildings in New York City. So if we're gonna build new buildings, they need to be efficient. We are absolutely building for the future, and we're gonna only use electricity in these buildings because by 2030, 50% of our electricity, where it's sourced from, will be renewable. And if you're gonna invest a lot of money in a new home, and this is the place where you raise your children or have your family members, we wanna create a living environment that's optimized, and Passive House brings that. We've always been known for design, but now we're known for the comfort of the interior air environment. That's very, very important to us.
Today, I'm delighted to continue a conversation about residential design with an expert panel. As we settle into post-pandemic life, can you each, in your own words, describe a few of your new rituals regarding public and private space, sanitation, work, and meal preparation, and how they might apply to home design moving forward? Nina, would you like to begin?
Sure. So I have 3 children, all ranging in age 18, 16, and 12. And so my husband and I, along with my 3 children, including my college-age daughter who was doing her first year at college, suddenly had to be working at home. We all had Zoom meetings, Google Class meetings. You know, my husband seemed to be on meetings constantly. So we all needed to have a space that we could have quiet working space. So we all took a different part of the house. And luckily we had this space to be able to spread out work decently outside of our bedrooms, as well as have quiet spaces to meet. So really being able to be flexible in spaces that might have been dedicated before to only dining, dedicated before to, only watching TV, suddenly had to take on lots of different functions. So really figuring out what space we're going to use when, but also realizing that the teenage kids especially like to move when they're working. They might start working in one place and then they need to move to another place, especially because they didn't have much other kind of social stimulation. So moving from place to place really helped with kind of reducing just the mundane of what daily life was, boiling down to. And then, dealing with the crazy dog was, another part of it. So really taking advantage of being flexible in our spaces, and then even getting into outdoor space whenever we could, as soon as once it got really nice. So just in terms of our work life, suddenly transforming our home space into a workspace was huge. And then into a workout space, because my husband used to play squash every day, every single day. And one of my daughters is a gymnast, and suddenly she was doing 3 Zoom gymnastics workout a week, and we needed to find spaces for that. So the living room became a gymnastics gym in the evenings for her to work out. And we all needed to kind of carve out space to also exercise. So work out, work, communicate with family and friends, all within our workspace. That was really huge in terms of our daily routines.
Drew, how did your day-to-day life change?
With my family, we've seen many of the same things that Nina's experienced. An interesting thing that we've seen is this daily cleansing, not just in the form of sanitizing things that are coming in from the outside, but also a cleansing from within. We've always had the instinct of doing cleaning, dispelling with the things that we don't really need on a somewhat regular basis, but that pace has stepped itself up considerably, which I found really interesting, right? This notion that open space and clean space and serene space, since we're spending so much time in the home, are more of a premium, and the clutter with the things that really aren't essential, really aren't needed, including some things that we thought we needed before. And in fact, if something's not essential, it's going out of the house, and it, well, it's the usual things that you'd expect, like the seasonal things, but it's also cooking utensils. We're cooking a lot, right? Just as I imagine a lot of people are cooking a lot more. And so we're actually realizing which things in the kitchen we actually use, and those things that have been just sitting there for eons. And, with that perspective, we're able to, I think we've thrown out half the kitchen. And I'm not exaggerating. So, you accumulate. I think we're in this mode of accumulation. It's a cultural mode. And I think it's one of the really positive shifts maybe that's coming out of this crisis is the paring down. And I think it's hopefully going to have a net positive effect on space and design.
Bill, how about you?
It's wonderful to hear Nina and Drew talk about what they've gone through. It's almost like this is a therapy session for me. Thank you for saying that, you guys, because I feel the same way in a lot of ways. I never realized I like to walk around when I work, and I'm walking through the house terrorizing everyone on a call. I lost my headphones for about 1 week, and everybody didn't like me in the house for a little while. But I did learn that about myself. When I'm in my office, I stand up and I walk around my office. I walk down the hallway. It doesn't seem to bother anyone, but when you do it in front of your girlfriend or your kids, they've got a different take on that. I also experienced something interesting where I own a home in the Catskills. I actually bought it from Drew at Hudson Woods. And I spend time up there, and I go outside, and I don't have to wear a mask, and I don't need hand sanitizer. It's just a few acres of me walking around and puttering around my property. And then when I spend time in New York, like I am now, it's different. You put the mask on, I've got hand sanitizer in my pocket. The decontamination is a little bit more extreme. So that has been an interesting change for me. I see the homes a little bit differently now. It's not always bad in the New York scene too, because in the Catskills, it's quite lonely. There's nobody really around. In New York, when you walk around, you feel the pandemic. You feel that everyone is going through it, and you're going through it as well. And there's some familiarity there. And so both have their pluses and minuses, I'd say.
Bill, do you think the core values of home ownership and homeowners have shifted or will shift post-COVID?
Well, I think one thing that's happening immediately that I'm just seeing in my friend network is that all the friends that did not have a second home now wish they did, because there's nothing to rent. Everybody's rented everything up in the surrounding area of New York City. So I just read an article yesterday about how the town of New Paltz, which is actually quite far away, it's about 2 hours, I'd say, maybe not two, maybe an hour 45 from New York City. Their market is exploding right now. Home sales are exploding. Very affordable houses there, not a lot of competition. And the realtors, their phones are off the hook. People are looking right now for that sort of secondary, hopefully inexpensive home to purchase, so that if this happens again, you can go to your home base and you're not struggling and battling other renters that are looking for all the rental options.
And in fact, many people are leaving the city altogether and buying these homes as primary. Nina, you're working on a conceptual virtual show house. Can you discuss some of your design concerns and how you're redefining what a home symbolizes now?
So some of the critical issues that we're taking a look at, that one of the primary ones is really the idea of mental and physical wellness, right? Especially within the Black community. One, we saw that because of existing health conditions, the people in the Black community have been disproportionately affected by COVID-19. And so how can we look at providing a supportive space within the residential space to support health? And does that mean how we address indoor air quality, how we address access to, growing maybe a bit of your own food in terms of vegetables, as well as medicinal herbs potentially? How does it encourage spaces for regular exercise, regular meditation, wellness exercises? So how can the functionality of the space itself actually help to respond to really some of the core needs of this community? But also beyond that, how can we look into ideas of community and extended family relationships that we see more of now? As we're designing the house, we're like, well, what if we had decided to bring, my parents to come and stay with us during lockdown? Where would they stay? My in-laws were actually supposed to come and stay with us, and we had to say, you really can't come because you have pre-existing conditions. And this was before schools closed, and I was going kind of berserk trying to think about how would we keep the spaces clean. But is there a way to isolate certain spaces so that if people needed to come for whatever reason, if it's not necessarily COVID, where you can isolate certain parts of the house for guests, perhaps for people who are ill that you want to have close, but you want to have them be able to have enough of a separation so that you don't contaminate them? Is that in a pool house? Is that a guest suite that has, some kind of buffer? So really thinking about issues that have emerged during COVID, but really affect us even beyond that and have always been issues in terms of how we live.
Bill, after years of highlighting LEED certification, why do you think more architects and designers and developers aren't insisting on more future-forward sustainable practices? I know you're very involved in passive house standards, which stress energy usage, building air tightness, heating, infrastructure, HVAC, air systems. Can you talk a little bit about how you're using these standards in your own projects?
Well, I would say the first thing about passive house principles that are really important to me is that we all have to look at what buildings are doing in our urban environment in terms of climate change. How many energy resources our buildings are taking. And the reality is in urban environments, they utilize the most amount of energy. I don't want to be a part of that. I want to build buildings that are better than the ones that I started with. And so that's what I've aimed to do. And it's really a simple principle of increasing the insulation. Insulation is not an extremely expensive thing when building a home. It's a line item that doesn't have to be massively expensive. So by doubling the insulation, just as the basis of understanding, you really do a lot. The first thing that you do is you're going to lower your heating and cooling bills, which is going to lower your energy consumption. And secondly, what happens to your interior air environment? The first thing is you have less drafts. the reality is drafts in your home are sort of uncomfortable. You're battling putting on more clothes, taking clothes off, whether it's winter or summer, there's effects from that. When you do insulate, you've got to introduce mechanical ventilation. Mechanical ventilation is when you bring in filtered fresh air from the outside into the inside, and you improve the indoor air quality of the home. When you improve the indoor air quality, you're improving your health. They've done studies in European office parks where they look at a passive house building and a non-passive house building. And number one, less people get sick in those office parks. People don't call out sick, they don't get sick because the air exchange inside, the guy that's sneezing next to you is not affecting you as much. Secondly, and this is the cool thing, breathing filtered fresh air actually makes you smarter. It improves your cognitive brain function. So I like to be smart. I want to be at my best all the time. I want my family to be at their best all the time. I want to be sharp. And it's quite a simple thing to introduce more insulation and these HRV or ERV systems into your home to bring in filtered fresh air. That's really the big difference in passive house. And those two things, health and carbon footprint, are the focus of my business and really in some ways of my life right now.
I'm going to start using this line that Bill's just used. I think it's brilliant that breathing fresh air in the home makes you smart. I've never heard that before. That's excellent, Bill. That's absolutely true. The way I look at it is that it's actually quite simple, and I think that one of the big problems in the way that we talk about sustainable building is that it becomes opaque, becomes something that seems quite complicated and inaccessible. It comes down to just making a set of decisions that are simple, smart decisions. A little bit of education. The system that Bill mentioned, an ERV system or an HRV system, is just an air exchange system. That introduction into a home makes a world of difference. It really is the difference between breathing healthy air versus unhealthy air. The same thing goes for all the materials that go into a building. Rather than using materials that off gas or materials that are sourced from very remote places, we pay a lot of attention to sourcing things carefully, as locally as we can, as natural as we can, understanding as much about them. I really think it comes down to these very, very simple principles.
With your work with Hudson Woods, how do your views of environmental issues dovetail with the needs and desires of the homeowners that you're servicing?
Well, with Hudson Woods, we approached building there in a lot of the ways that I'm talking about, very simply, very naturally, and in a very environmentally friendly way. One of the things that's happened there, by the nature of the way that we've structured that project, is that all of the owners are embedded in nature. Literally, the houses are built into the earth and open to the outdoors in a way that people can exist in their indoor environments in a way where they can appreciate the outdoors. And so I think that the more that we can appreciate nature, being in a natural environment, the more that we're going to be inclined to preserve nature, right? So it's again, very simple thing. If we bring those kinds of principles back into cities, I think the more that we can incorporate a connection to nature in cities, which of course more challenging inherently, the better off we're going to be in advocating for environmental conservation.
Nina, what types of alternative strategies would you suggest when rethinking urban dwellings?
I think what I found to be really key is access to some kind of outdoor space. If we're talking very specifically about urban dwelling, where oftentimes, people are living really close to one another. If you're apartment living, many people did not have access to outdoor space, even just to be like a 5-foot by 10-foot piece of balcony would make such a difference to living through a lockdown, right? And even beyond that, that space that you can use to have pots that you can actually grow lettuce, basil, rosemary, mint, all kinds of things just on that one small balcony. And again, and even if you're not growing plants to consume, I think, like Drew said, there's something about having plants and tending to plants within your own living space that connects you to the nature beyond your own living space, that it makes such a big difference. So I think if we're speaking very specifically about urban dwelling, just access to a very, very small amount of outdoor space would make a huge difference to your home life.
Bill, talking about the sudden exodus to a secondary housing market, both rural and suburban, do you think there's a way to incorporate a more thoughtful, considered design model without upending existing homeowners and their sort of ideal of home?
Well, that's really the big question, isn't it? Is a developer, as we invest money in the city, which we will continue to do because we believe in the city, how we invest dollars outside of the city smartly at the right price point. What I learned from Drew at Hudson Woods is building community, because that's what it's all about. Somebody doesn't want to just go find a random home that's nice in the middle of nowhere and not know anyone or not have any friends around. If you build community, it's really the way to go, and keep it within a two hour radius of New York City. Now, I personally have an idea in my head, which everybody that's listening to this Zoom is going to steal it, so don't steal it from me. But I really want to get into the prefab world. In fact, I have a friend in Utah that makes RVs, Canadian RVs, which are bigger than American RVs. And I want to hire Nina and Drew, and we're going to get together and figure out how to piece those modules together and build homes that we can drop into place in 3 months instead of 12 months. I could see that being a real affordable model to get people who want to live outside of the city, work in their new home, build a small community of people that are like-minded. And, I think that's my next place that I'm going to go.
Levittown on Long Island was created as a community-based suburb, and as time went on, everyone wanted to migrate back into the city. And it's interesting now how in the 21st century there is this new desire to leave the city again as a result of COVID. What do you see these new communities, looking like?
Well, I live at Hudson Woods, and I think Drew did an unbelievable job of helping us create community. We're all on an app together, and we communicate with each other about our homes and about what's going on, and everybody's out there to help each other. I think that's what we all want in an urban environment or any environment.
Bill touched on this notion of like-mindedness, and it really is people who comprise a community. Without the people, there wouldn't be a community. What I hope we see, that's not something that we saw over the last 40 and 50 years, is an embrace of nature. I mean, with the simple approach of preserving nature, our developments, our communities where we live will be so much richer. This is what we as designers and developers have the responsibility of driving towards, right? Developing communities that are sound from a financial standpoint, and also sound from the standpoint of people's lives, people's everyday lives.
What is your perspective on bringing rural and nature elements into an urban setting?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest positives about the rural setting is often, again, the easy access to outdoors, right? Easy access to the nature and that fresh air, which is why I really love that idea that Bill had in terms of developing these smaller footprint, kind of cabin-like prefab spaces that you can place within this really naturalistic setting, but also because they're smaller and they're prefab, they might likely be a lot less expensive. So then more accessible, right? So more people might be able to leave the city, for the weekend or however long to escape to their little cabin in the woods. And it would be part of this larger community. And if you needed to, perhaps it's like you and an extended family member share one and it rotates. And then how can you bring that in? Again, some kind of access within your living space to the outdoors, whatever size that might be, is huge. And as much access to that green as you can, if it's not within your home space, within multiple dwelling units, right? So if you have a row of row houses, how can you connect all the backyards? And suddenly we can share that amenity. Maybe you can still have some just a much smaller private space within the outdoors, but that shared extends that the kids can play soccer, whatever, within this enclosed areas. You can share a lot of the amenities that are outdoor spaces. We don't all need our own shed or garage. Why can't we share that in the communal outdoor space, especially in like Brooklyn, where we do have some backyards? Opening that all up to the block would be amazing.
Drew, have past events like 9/11 and Hurricane Sandy, and I'm not sure if you were in New Orleans at the time of Katrina, how has that influenced your work over the past 2 decades? And if so, how do you forecast when building or rebuilding for a post-coronavirus urban landscape?
Right. It's interesting that we're running through a series of recent catastrophes, natural catastrophes of one sort or of another. I think that we all realizing that this is our new existence, and it's clearly a result of the fact that we haven't taken care of our planet, right? So the disaster that was closest to my heart was Katrina, because I'm originally from New Orleans. I actually spent 5 years right after Katrina working in the heart of a neighborhood in New Orleans called the St. Roch neighborhood, conceptualizing the rebuilding of that neighborhood. And it was for me a combination of getting into the heart of a community and getting to know the people there. And at the same time, it was an opportunity for me to really delve into sustainable building technologies. There have been significant advances in building technologies that we all have the responsibility to learn about. But really more importantly, ultimately, we now as design professionals have the imperative to introduce them into the buildings that we build. And so these disasters, all of them, have reinforced this notion. And the current crisis with COVID is no different.
Bill, how do you view the dynamic between urban and suburban? And how do you think that will evolve over the next 5 years?
Brooklyn is my home and where I will stay. And I'm building some beautiful multifamily in Brooklyn. So my hope is that everybody stays in Brooklyn. But I really love everything that Drew and Nina are saying. And I think that really the key to residential right now, and it really has been what we focused on at Brooklyn Home Company for a long time, is whether you're in a suburban environment or whether you're in a city environment, you want to create an oasis, a place that you can escape, a place that you can be comfortable, that you can be home. And everything that Nina touched on, even if it's just a little balcony with a little plant, that's so important. We're throwing balconies everywhere we can for that exact reason. And the other part is, even though you're not seeing a beautiful tree and your neighbors don't agree to widen the backyards by eliminating fences, Nina, that's a great idea. I wish my whole neighborhood would do that. That would be a wonderful thing. But it doesn't work that way always. I want it to, but it doesn't always work that way. As long as you're getting good quality light into your home, we will use those tools of creating an oasis with layout and light and outdoor space if we are in the tiniest New York City apartment or in a big suburban home. And it's just about good design. It's just about good living wherever you're gonna be.
Nina, what are some of your personal predictions for the home of the future?
I think a lot more expectation that for flexibility of spaces, right? And when I'm designing for, let's say, a Manhattan apartment, I always have to think about that because space is at a high premium. And how do we have to use built-ins or other kinds of technology to transform a study into a guest room or whatever we might need to? But I think beyond just the Manhattan apartments, I think all houses across the country are really going to need to think about how can we make each square foot do more for us. And the way to do that is really to understand it as being really flexible. I've been thinking more about allowing for more people to work in the kitchen at the same time, because one of the things that my teenage girls, I have three girls, not because they're girls, but are doing more of is baking. So there's often more than one person trying to navigate that kitchen space. How can we come up with mechanical systems that can help us to move things and transform things really quickly so we can, suddenly make a room that was 100 square feet into, twice as big just by opening it up into the next room. I think we understand that the home is even more important to us now, and being able to have it allow for more functions is going to be really key.
I'm going to talk about the office space because kitchens I found have always been important in the home projects that we do. It's generally where intense amount of focus will always lie, but office is not so much, right? So coming out of this, I think a bigger difference comes into play with offices. I think no matter what, even if we're not asked explicitly to do so in projects, we'll be thinking about where are people going to work in the homes, especially if there's not a designated office space. Oftentimes there's not. Oftentimes there can't be. And so what does it mean for an office to be combined with another room? And if that's thoughtfully designed, that will make for a much different outcome than something that's integrated ad hoc.
What's your position on technology in the home? Nina has been working with a company called Delmos.
Delos Darwin system. Yeah. We've just been researching them, but they have an amazing platform. They will be able to monitor and help you to adjust air quality, water quality, light quality. Generally, they're supposed to all help with your mental and physical well-being, because I think, like Bill mentioned before, if you have clear filtered air, if you have systems that can adjust the lighting in your home so that it can help you de-stress and also to fall asleep and wake up feeling refreshed. And if you have water filtration systems that can help you have clean, drinkable water within your household, it will really make a huge difference in your overall well-being. So those are the things that we are really attracted to in that particular system and hope to incorporate it in the concept house.
We're also working closely with Delos and also NYSERDA. NYSERDA really more from the standpoint of moving towards the electrification of homes and buildings and the removal of all fossil fuels, and that includes the generation of energy with solar PV. So, we're not only fueling the energy grid with renewables, but we're also collecting that energy from individual homes.
I think technology in a home is very important, but it could get very expensive very quickly. So the companies, fortunately and unfortunately, that are taking a real leadership role is, if you look at Amazon, if you look at Google, they're assembling a large quantity of products that all communicate with each other in the home, speak to each other, and you can run it all from one app. And I'm noticing this a lot because we look at technology. For example, I don't like people to have to use keys to get into my buildings. So I always invest in a keypad on the front door that's Bluetooth enabled. So when you walk up to the door opens by itself. Nest thermostats. You walk in, you see a Nest thermostat. It's a beautiful thermostat. If you forget to change it when you leave your house, you go on vacation, you do it from your phone. I want that wireless keypad on my front door and my Nest to be in one app. And Google has that, and Amazon has that, and it's not expensive. But when you walk into the homes, and we've thought about these things, and there's 4, 5 different products that all are communicating on one app, and we tell our customer to put that app on their phone, they say, this is a great home. It's great technology. It's well thought out. And it's all connected to my Wi-Fi, and I don't need a low voltage guy to come fix the system every 6 months. I could fix it myself. So I think tech is really important, and it continues to evolve, but it has to be cost effective or nobody's going to use it. And the stuff that's real expensive always breaks. I'm not interested in that.
Especially in terms of the passive house technology, I feel like even though the benefits are so obvious, people are hesitant to like invest the time and the training and into the certification. I don't know if Bill and Drew feel the same, but
I agree. I think it's going to depend on a couple of different factors. One, at the policy level, right? So if we see things like New York City mandating all new buildings have green roofs, right, which is coming to effect, that's going to create a significant shift. So hopefully we'll be seeing more um, in the way of policy that brings us forward.
I think that that's all right. There have been developers that have done passive house buildings that I've had a tremendous amount of respect for. But I think the thing that's happening is people didn't take those attributes that are in a passive house home seriously. And they didn't quite understand what high performance the home could perform at. I think it's time that people are looking deeper into their health, into their indoor air quality, into their safety. It is time right now. My hope is that I can help be a part of telling the story so that people understand those benefits and that everybody's going to want to do it. And I think we're headed there because the products are getting cheaper, more people are getting trained, and it's becoming more the norm.
If you could redefine home today, how would you describe it?
home is a place for living. I mean, whatever that might mean, I think right now, even if we end up going into the office more often, once, whatever the new normal is, we still are regenerating at home, right? We might be doing more of the things that we started in lockdown, whether it's the yoga or some of that, more of that work from home or that cooking more. It's kind of that place where things incubate. And so when we leave, I feel like we're much more conscious of leaving home when we leave now. When we step out of the door, it's like, okay, we're leaving, we're going somewhere else. So it's like our little pod for kind of generating life and then helps us to send us out to whatever we need to do.
That definitely registers for me. I think that the new definition of home for me is that's really where my people are. That's where my children are, the people that I love, that I'm seeing every day. I mean, that is one very positive thing is I've connected with my kids in ways that I have never. We're busy. Those kids are busy. They're at school all day. They have after school activities. No more. They're with me. And that is the real treasure, is that I've got to spend a lot of quality time with them. It makes me appreciate the space as well. As people have said, every square inch is important, and we can utilize every square inch of our home.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with everything that Nina and Bill are saying. I mean, I've always known that home is a reflection of yourself and your family in so many different interesting ways. I think that this period's reinforced that, and I think I think it's quite natural for all of us in this call to be thinking about that on a regular basis. I think for a lot of people that may not register, so what's exciting from my standpoint is the ability to come together with our clients and the communities that we work with, and talk with them and work with them at a deeper level, where they've taken stock of the fact that home really is life. Home is life. Home is the place where we spend the most time, create the most important memories of our lives, have a lot of really, really important experiences, and hopefully most of which are growth experiences and positive experiences. But there a lot of different things that we all know need to take place in the home. We're learning that the hard way. The home is being tested. It's going for a really, really intensive test drive.
What will you do differently if you do go back to an office?
I used to feel guilty not going into my office and working from home. I don't think I'm going to feel that anymore.
We all did.
I think I'll feel good staying home twice a week and going in the other days and just going in for key meetings. I'm not going to feel guilty anymore. I'm going to let that go.
I think you're right. I think that's a really big part of this. It took a few weeks to really get back into a good rhythm working from home. But I think once we did, we noticed so many of the benefits, right? Oh, it's just different. It's two different kinds of experiences. And I think there are benefits of working in the office and there are benefits of working from home. And I think if we allow ourselves to do, more of each, then it will be beneficial ultimately to our overall working experience. So yeah, absolutely.
Well, I want to thank everyone for participating. So
Yeah,
thank
thanks,
you.
Melissa. This has been great.
Thank you so much, Melissa, for your thoughtful questions. It's been a really, really interesting conversation. I look forward to continuing the dialogue with everyone.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Melissa, Nina, Drew, and Bill, for so generously sharing your expertise and your insights. And thank you all for joining us. Design Talks Now will keep the conversations going through July. We're interested in what's on your mind and what matters to you now. And so for now, please continue to stay safe, stay smart. Design stands together.